Hey, Ishan, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you. How have you been
My
today?
pleasure. All well. It's a Friday morning. Doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Today it's a evening here and I'm
Yes.
enjoying it as always. And I was super excited because I could not interview you last time because of my health conditions. So I was like super excited. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Ishan, there are a lot of things that I would like to ask you, but let me just begin from a very basics. If you can just share one of those memories from your childhood that brings a smile on your face today as well.
I mean, there are many memories, but I think the one that brings a lot of smile is, having this weekly ritual of going to the local barbecue with my parents and a close family friend
Mhm.
and having sikh kebabs and chicken tikkas there, with sitting on the table when I was small.
Yeah. And you are from Delhi.
I'm from Delhi, so hence the tikkas and the barbecue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ishan, let me just come straight to the point because very rare one would get an opportunity to speak to somebody like you, right? Somebody who had a very humble beginning and then moved on and started taking care of the global roles. And it's not that something shifted in you in just one day. In fact, you co-founded your first organization when you were pretty early, right? You were in your third year of your engineering.
Yeah, I think I was 21. Yeah,
Yeah.
21 that time.
So, what was the driving force for you then?
Honestly, it was a bunch of very close friends coming together to do this. A couple of them had gone to IIT, I had gone to a different school in Delhi University, another one had gone to another engineering college. And when we all came together, we just started seeing, ki, what is this happening? I mean, why did we study so hard for 2 years, 3 years for engineering prep? And the kind of education we are getting is not really going to prepare us for the future.
Hmm,
So just as kids, as second year, third year kids in engineering college, we decided why don't we just start a company to help our fellow, students to learn. And that's how the idea of Appin at that point came together in 2004,
hmm,
to literally just help friends learn technologies.
hmm, hmm. And at that point in time, did you even anticipate for yourself that one day you'll walk on the path of entrepreneurship?
No, I didn't. I mean, it was a very normal conversation sitting at a Domino's in Delhi over a winter break and just discussing with friends. And then we just started it. We didn't,
Hmm,
neither of us really knew what entrepreneurship was all about,
hmm,
but we just started, making plans. And, I took the role of the marketing lead there. Someone else took the role of, the content lead there. And we just launched a company.
yeah,
And this is back in 2004 when entrepreneurship was not really well known in
precisely.
India.
In fact, that's what my question is because at that point in time, 8 out of 10 people they were joining BPOs, right? Converges was there, Daksh was there. There's so many BPOs which were mushrooming and absorbing so many engineers. And at that point, then nobody spoke about startups and entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. And again, I don't. I think it was a fact that there were a few friends doing it together. It seemed like a fun project,
Hmm,
frankly. I think the
hmm,
switch happened very quickly after that once we started it. And I still remember. So the model was essentially we hired classrooms and then we developed some content and we started delivering training. We hired some trainers. We started delivering trainings in areas of embedded systems, network
hmm,
security, and some other areas. .NET at that point, some courses in Java. What was wonderful was seeing happy faces, students coming out of those classrooms saying, we learned something.
hmm.
I didn't see that in my college. I would see it at the classrooms and app and that people coming out and saying, learn something,
Hmm,
talking about something. And that was very exciting. What was
hmm.
even more exciting was to see faces of people who came out and said, oh man, I don't want to do this. And the idea of that someone could decide that this is something they didn't want to do was also very appealing to me that we probably helped this person save a lot of time in his or her life.
Hmm.
That there was a dream that I want to be a technologist, and these courses are helping them to decide that they don't want to be. So I think both outcomes were very exciting for me to see at that point, and that's what really, really then sort of got me to go into the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And Ishan, what is really fascinating when I was going through your life journey is that you did not stop there, something that you started as a fun project with your friends. And even when you moved out of that, you founded another company called Edukart.com. And interestingly,
Right.
which became India's largest edtech marketplace in only 5 years before it was acquired by Paytm. I mean, how did you come up with that idea that early in the edtech industry in India? Because at that point in time, nobody spoke about edtechs.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was a smart thing or just way too early
Hmm,
to start, frankly. But yeah, so Appin happened and then ended up going to business school in the US. I spent 2 years at Stanford, came back to India. Appin had successfully instilled this idea in me that being part of other people's success was giving me happiness.
hmm,
And education is a great way of achieving that for yourself. So,
indeed.
I came back to India and, I said I want to start an education company. Uh, I did start actually before I started the company. I worked with Facebook for some time. I even
Hmm,
worked with Paytm in its early days some time. But this is something I wanted to do, so I started Edukart in 2011. And Edukart wasn't the first iteration of the model. We again started with offline trainings in colleges. This time of different topics like digital marketing, retail management, and others.
hmm,
But very quickly, I realized that there were a lot of programs in India that were offering similar things. So let's say digital marketing. There were at least 100 plus courses at in 2014 or so
hmm,
offering
hmm,
digital marketing, and they all had the same table of contents. So then, how would a student choose which program to take?
hmm,
How would they compare them, contrast those programs? How would they conveniently enroll with the programs?
hmm,
And that is where the idea of marketplace came. This is also the time when marketplaces were really scaling up in areas of e-commerce, whether it was Flipkart
hmm,
or Snapdeal, or it was the whole online travel had matured. Uh, there was also all these Makan.coms, for
hmm,
real estate. Education was a tough one. Uh, but that's an area I chose because I realized that, listen, we can definitely help consumers get uh, clarity on what program to choose. And as a business model, we would make money on the transaction. So that's how Educard came along at that
hmm.
point.
Yeah. Interestingly, what I believe, Ishan, right now you can talk about all these things so easily as if they're just flowing through you, but I'm sure you had your own share of challenges as well. And while I was going through your book that you have written called the Make the Move, right, where you have spoken about your lessons that you have learned in entrepreneurship, where you have emphasized on making the move. You cannot stand still and wait for the wonders to happen. Now, if you may share a point in your life where you found it extremely difficult to take the next step forward, how did you deal with that situation? How did you make the move?
Yeah, I can actually. So to me, this happened much earlier in life, and it happens to many kids growing up in India. The year is 2001. I had already spent 2 years preparing for IIT JEE preparation,
Hmm,
and I went and gave my exams. I came back and I bungled upon a question. And for whoever has gone through the preparation knows that if you go and bungle upon one question in a subjective paper, you are essentially lowering down your ranks by hundreds, if not thousands.
hmm,
The results came out, and I got admission in a college in Banaras through that, which was at that time it was called as ITBHU.
hmm,
I went there, and I realized I didn't want to be there. Uh, Nothing wrong with Banaras,
hmm,
but as someone who has grown up in Delhi, I was just more used to a faster pace of life, and I wanted to be in a cosmopolitan city.
hmm,
All my close friends at that time were going to different IITs and all that, and I took this. I found it difficult to be there.
hmm,
I didn't know what to do. I didn't. I didn't want to be left behind,
hmm,
but I also didn't want to be there, so I felt stuck.
hmm,
And then I just took a call of coming back and saying, "Listen, I'm going to sit at home for another year and work hard at it again
hmm,
to for IIT." preparation. So I actually came back in 2001, left Banaras, came back and spent a year
Hmm.
in at home preparing, and that was tough. But I knew that I wanted to do this because I did not want the option I had. And one of my very close family friends sent me a note that time. I said, Ishan, at such young age, people typically go for short-term gratification. I'm so happy to see that you're going for
Hmm.
long-term gratification, and
Hmm.
you decided to take on this pain on yourself, and your friends are out there enjoying.
Hmm.
And I think that worked very well for me, that
Hmm.
decision at that point of time. So I think that is one where I think about, to your question, that I was really stuck and it was difficult to move, but I think I was able to deal with the situation by thinking, what is the long term view I want for
Hmm.
myself? And it
Hmm.
worked well for me.
And I think that's one of the finest piece of advice that you can provide to anyone who's just starting off, who's just taking off, because the initial first 10 years of an individual's life, they are extremely important. In fact, we are working on a project on the first 10 years and how every small step that you take, every single step that you can take can actually take you in a very different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the early years are important, uh,
Hmm.
especially professionally, and you know, what view you take at that point in life is critical, short term versus long term, because that will define how you act in those years. So absolutely, I agree with you there.
Hmm. 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 Now, Ishan, let's move few years in your life.
Yeah,
If today, if you were to look at how would you define yourself? You've worked with the likes of Facebook, of the Paytms of the world. You have the last assignment that you were on to was on Udacity, right? The global role that you were heading. You have been an entrepreneur. Now, hand on heart, if you were to define yourself at the core, who is Ishan?
I think the way I like to think of myself, and this is far from perfect, would be
Hmm.
an engineer by degree, leader by profession, but an entrepreneur by heart.
Hmm.
That's how I like to think of myself today
Hmm.
when I look back at the journey that I've had till now.
Yeah. So let's dig deeper into the what you said, that entrepreneur by heart. What does it take to be an entrepreneur?
I think being an entrepreneur is a mindset. I have spent almost 8 years being an entrepreneur, building companies, another 2 years
Hmm.
as country head for Udacity in India, which was also very, very entrepreneurial
Hmm.
in nature.
Hmm.
And in all of this, I realized that what really matters is the entrepreneurial mindset versus
Hmm.
being an entrepreneur. And there's a distinction, right? Over the last few years, and I'm really happy for this, but like entrepreneurship has become very fashionable. It's
Yeah.
glamorous. Behind the scenes is really hard work.
Hmm.
Any overnight success is a decade plus in making,
More
right?
than that.
As we sit here, 48 hours back, Freshdesk went public on NASDAQ.
Yeah.
Freshdesk just did not go public on NASDAQ. Girish and the team have been working for years and years to
Hmm.
build that, sweating it out every day, right? So that's all about mindset. So to me, uh, that's what entrepreneurship stands for. Do you have the mindset to be resilient? Do you
Hmm.
have the mindset to be patient,
Hmm.
to play the long game? Do you have the mindset to continuously learn? And then do you have the mindset to continuously change track as and when needed versus getting stuck into what you decided was the right hypothesis for yourself? I think if you do all these four things, you can essentially be entrepreneurial in nature. Now, whether you run your own company at that point or whether you work with someone, is just your day job.
Yeah. 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 You're talking about resilience, you're talking about learning, you're talking about adapting to the new challenges that you're facing and showing up every day, no matter what. And Ishan, you have worked with so many great leaders in the industry, starting from the Paytms of the world, where you work directly with Vijay, and then you worked with the likes of where you're working with Udacity. What's the best piece of advice that you have received, and how did it help you?
I mean, there have been many, I feel your careers are built on shoulders of others. And
Always.
there are many who have mentored me along the way. So I could continuously keep on rattling out names and advice. But since you mentioned Vijay, Vijay has been a mentor for me forever, and I've learned a lot from him. Just sometimes by getting that advice directly, or sometimes by just seeing him in action.
Hmm.
Um, One of the pieces of advice that he gave me directly was reset, reset, reset.
Hmm.
And what that meant was I asked him, "Vijay, how do you manage so many different topics in a day? You're going from meeting to meeting." And then his advice was, "Listen, Ishan, I just make sure when I go from a meeting to the other meeting, I'm consciously resetting."
Hmm.
And that really helps, uh, as a leader. That has been very helpful. It's very simple advice, but it's very powerful. That all you need to do before the next meeting is forget the earlier one so that you go into it fresh,
I,
right? So on a,
I
on a day-to-day basis, it's very powerful.
yeah, I wish it would have been easy as you are saying it, because what you're talking about, it sounds very easy. A reset, what you're talking about is let go of everything that has happened just a moment back and show up in a very different energy altogether. Start from scratch, start to build up from this moment.
Yeah. And since you said show up, the other advice that I've gotten is show up. It matters, right? That half of the game is purely about showing up,
Hmm.
especially on the tough days, right? If you show up, then things will definitely improve.
Hmm.
It may take time, but if you don't show up, you, I'm pretty sure things will not improve, right? So showing up matters. That's the second advice that I've felt has been very helpful for me, especially in times when things have been very challenging.
Hmm. Yeah. In fact, that's one of the essence that I've received from your book, right? And Ishan, now it's not that you've always been on the receiving side of the advices. Now, the kind of roles that you're playing, you've been handling teams. In fact, you write a lot about managing teams and processes and systems and North Stars. So while going through one of your blogs recently on Scale It Up, I was stuck with what you've written around building teams. Now, when you're working with people, what's the best piece of advice that you have offered to somebody that the other person has thanked you for?
Again, I mean, a lot of these things happen over conversations. But I do remember one clear incident where I told, my colleague and I were discussing what this colleague should be doing next. And he had these two offers in hand. And, you know, in one of the offers, which was essentially retention from his current company, he would get massive financial bump.
Hmm.
In the new offer that he had, it was still a good compensation package, but lesser than the one that he would get if he continued to stay at the current company.
Hmm.
He was a little conflicted. And my suggestion to him was, why don't you think 5 years ahead
Hmm.
and ask yourself this question from 5 years older version of yourself? What should you have been doing today
Hmm.
that would make you happier at that point?
Hmm.
And, we had this conversation and we hung up the phone. And a few minutes later, he called me back and said that, listen, I asked 5 year older self, and the answer became very clear that I want to do the new thing and not stay in the current place. So this person let go of a massive compensation bump because
Hmm.
he took the long term view on his career
Wow.
and life. So I think, in summary, uh, the advice that I try to give to my colleagues and friends genuinely is just, if you're making a decision which is important, try to visualize how will it pan out for you over the next few years, and then
Wow.
make it.
Yeah. So from where I'm looking at Ishan right now is that patience and not looking for instant gratification has always been your trait, whether you're applying it in your life or when you're giving a piece of advice to the other person.
Yep, I agree. And I didn't realize this very early, right? But the
Mm.
IIT incident I told you was critical in this. Even when I left Appin, a company that I'd built, Uh, it was a tough call to make, but it felt like the right call to make for me long term. Uh, when Edukart got actually hired by Paytm,
Hmm.
it was the right call to make. It wasn't everything wasn't easy, but it was the right call to make. So
Hmm.
I, you know, sometimes the right calls are really tough. Then how do you make them, right? What additional inputs do you get into making them? And I think that input to me typically is the long term view.
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
i if I do this today, what happens 5 years from now? If I don't do this today, what happens 5 years from now? And it might completely work in the other way,
Hmm.
but at least bringing this long term view into
Perspective.
consideration, perspective, helps to alter the thinking at that point and expands the thinking overall.
Hmm. 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 So that has been one of your very important parameter to take any decision, long-term view. What are the other parameters that you consider before you make any decision in your life?
How does it affect my life, right? So we always say work update or a life update. I always think of it as work and life are just mingled up,
Hmm.
right? So any change I make at work will have an impact on my life, and any change I make in my life will have an impact on my work, right? So
Hmm.
the other parameter is like, how does it, if this decision has to be taken, how will it impact my life holistically?
Hmm. Hmm.
Will I get to spend more time with my family or less time? Will I be happier in the day or less happier in the day, right? So I kind of try to bring those aspects in also
Hmm.
while taking a decision, right? If it's a work decision, a lot of it is about culture, right? Like whatever decision is being taken, let's say if I'm looking at a new role, the 8-10 hours that I spend working, is that a place where I would love to work or not, right? So I think I kind of try to, depending on the situation, that those are the kind of parameters I like to bring in
Hmm.
to make a decision.
Yeah. As I'm just listening to you, I came across this quote 3 days back, and it says, if you're sad that you made a decision, which is the right decision, it's okay. Sadness is one of the emotions. And when I just bring this quote with what you said about reset and looking at my life decisions from two perspectives, looking at my life as a holistic rather than looking at into sections of work or personal life and the long term gains or the long term perspective, I think it's bringing a lot of clarity for me. Thank you for bringing that.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Now, Ishan, you are managing you manage the global operations of the organizations, right? What does it take to run an organization at that level?
I mean, there's a lot that goes behind running global teams.
Hmm.
I'm actually on Scale It Up. I'm currently writing a two-piece sort of newsletter on how to build high-performing teams, and the first part essentially says that high-performing team is much greater than high performers,
Hmm.
right? I read this quote of Michael Jordan where he essentially is saying in the late 90s, where he's talking about the fact that talent wins games,
Hmm.
but teams win championships, right? And I think if you think of building global organizations and running global teams or any kind of teams for that matter,
Hmm.
right? You want to start by getting high performers in your team who will do these roles well, whatever the roles are. But then you set the culture and the norms in the team in a way that this bunch of high performers can come together to actually work as a team.
Hmm.
Otherwise, all we'll have is these bunch of high performers who are trying to deliver independently
Hmm.
and not collectively as a team.
Hmm.
So I think that's the starting point of building high performing teams that can run complex operations. Then you kind of form norms, you set the right incentives. I
Hmm.
think transparency and communication are very key ingredients to the whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, Aligning the team to a goal is important so that everybody knows what we're aiming for.
Hmm.
That has multiple positive effects. One of them being that it removes the personal angle out of the equation. So if two different people come with two different ideas,
Hmm.
if we have a clearly stated goal, it's easier to decide which idea we should adopt for the goal. So then
Hmm.
you're not saying no to a person, but you're saying no to an
An
idea,
idea.
right?
Yeah.
So it's never personal. Those biases get removed, right? So I think those are some of those sort of practices that have to come in when one is running global teams. And I think finally, as a leader, you have to be really, really available for your team.
Mm,
And I'm not saying this time wise, but I'm saying emotionally
mm,
available. Your teams should be able to trust you. They know that you have their back. Uh,
mm,
and you are supporting them through everything.
mm.
I also believe in, you know, once you commit to a decision, then the team commits to a decision, then it's not who made it. And again, this has all been said many, many times, but I think
Mm,
it's
mm.
you doing this in practice, and practicing this is
It's a
not
lot.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think those are, I mean, that is how I have tried to build my teams. Have I
Mm,
been right always? Absolutely not. I made a
mm.
lot of mistakes, but that's how I try to run my teams.
Yeah. Let me just double click on Ishan what you said, and it's still resonating with me very, very loudly when you said it's not about high performance individuals, it's about high performing teams. Now, if you may share from your experience one of those instances where you had a high performance individual who was not fitting into the team culture. And I'm sure you would have come across these kind of situations a lot. How did you manage to deal with that so that you don't have to let go of this person, and yet the entire team gets to leverage what he or she has to offer?
So, Gaurav, let me ask you a question. Why is there a condition of not letting go of the person in that
Because a
context?
highly performing individual.
But that doesn't matter, right? That's exactly, I mean, that's the crux of this whole situation
Mm,
that, or how you run teams, at least from my perspective.
mm,
You can get you get high performance together, and let's say we're running a team, and then
mm,
suddenly you have this one who is not able to work well with the rest of the team,
mm,
right? The two three things you can do. First, of course, try to understand where is the problem,
mm,
right? Is there some coaching required, mentoring required? Is there some issues between this person and the manager, or the teams? Are the incentives not well defined? Like, what is happening? You kind of figure that part out.
mm,
Assuming all of that is not okay, you can set that correct,
mm,
right? But assuming all of that is okay and the problem still continues, typically it's a culture fit problem at that point where this individual is just not fitting the culture of the team
mm,
and how the team works well together, right?
mm.
Converting people to fit in a culture, I think, is a complex task to undertake.
It's a very difficult task.
Yeah. And I
Mm,
don't think companies have time to do it,
mm,
right?
mm.
It just doesn't. So, what's the best thing for the individual and the company at that point if it is not working out, and even if the person is a high performer, is to part ways. That person will end up finding something that matches his or her style better. It's just a different style, right? Or culture. It may
Hmm,
have nothing. That person may flourish in some other company in the same industry a lot more.
hmm,
So why would I, as a leader at that point, want to hold on to that person just
hmm.
because he or she is a high performer? So I think building high performance teams, and this is probably the part two of the article that I'm writing, is at times you'll have to let go
Hmm.
high performers as well, just
Which may
because they're
not be
not the right
easy.
culture fit.
Yeah.
But it's not also that difficult.
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
It may not
hmm,
be easy, but it's not difficult because the moment you weigh that against the entire team,
hmm.
and what even one, especially in small teams, what even one person's presence who's not a good culture fit can do to the rest of the team,
Hmm.
the cons clearly outweigh the pros,
Yeah.
the positives. So, you at times you just have to let go of the person.
Because neither it's serving the organization nor that individual. As you mentioned, that if you possibly let that person go, the other person might find something where he or she would be able to fit into culture and
Yeah.
grow really fast.
And you can have a very transparent conversation. I've had very transparent conversation in such cases with people that listen, you're talented and you're clearly a high performer. You have demonstrated experience in the past, but you're just not being the right fit for this team.
Hmm,
And that will, long term, again, think of the long term view. If the person is not right fit for the team, he or she will never get good reviews from his peers or her
hmm,
peers. And therefore, anytime, a performance review cycle comes, in spite of the performance, the person is getting rated lower due to other cultural ratings and all of that, right?
mm,
Then that will essentially deaccelerate the growth of that person in the company.
mm.
And if you help that person understand it, I think more often than not, people get it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. Ishan, let's take one step forward. I was just watching your life, and it was so fascinating for me because somebody who started writing about make the move to the same person writing on scale it up. Now, would love to understand what shifts have you observed in yourself as an Ishan of 21 when he started the first organization, the first company, and now where he is. But before we get there, would love to ask you, what does scale it up mean to you?
Scale it up, you know, has been on my mind for a couple of years now. It is essentially my attempt to capture all my learnings that I've had by working with incredible people over the years,
Mm,
um, so that I can share them. Essentially, I feel for companies to become meaningful, scaling is a critical phase,
mm,
and that's what I'm trying to write about. Uh, to your question of how the shift in my thinking from make the move to scale it up, that's a very interesting question because there's actually something in the middle as well, which I never got to write about
mm,
as life continued to happen. So the first was make the move, which was essentially, you want to do something, just go ahead and make the move.
mm,
Don't wait. Few years later, and by the way, make the move to scale it up is essentially like a 12, uh, 14-year gap, right, in between. So a few years after make the move, what I started realizing was that, making the move is just not enough.
mm,
Managing the move is equally important. So you have made a move and now things are happening. How do you continue? How do you start managing that stuff? How do you
mm,
manage risk? How do you ensure that the move stays positive, and is going in the right direction? So I started thinking about it as manage the move. At one point, I wanted to write a follow-on book to make the move, which would be titled as Manage the Move. But as I said, life happened, got busy in work, family, everything, and just skipped that part of bringing it out.
mm,
Last couple of years, the thinking started changing again, which was okay. So you made a move and you managed a move. What's next?
mm,
Will it stagnate or will it grow?
mm,
And from that is where the whole scaling up idea started coming in the no. So after you make a move and manage the move, you have to then start scaling it up.
mm.
And that's where scale it up came. So I have, jumped from make the move to scale it up. But that's really the journey of my, how my thought process has evolved
Mm,
over the
mm.
last decade or so.
The scale it up can be looked at from an individual's perspective. It could be looked at from an organization's perspective.
Absolutely.
And the space, the phase where you are right now, Ishan, is where you are leading organization. Where you're leading large teams. You are managing P&L accounts of the huge organizations. Right? Just curious, what do you think? What are the most important three pillars which are extremely important for a leader to consider before he starts to consider?
I think there are many. The ones that I am focusing on are first is just intentional leadership, right? Like just making sure that you're being a leader all the time and being a leader of your team, leader who can be trusted,
Hmm,
uh, and a leader who's known to be fair, uh, doesn't let politics creep in, and so on and so forth. And second is the element of team building,
hmm,
that scaling it up doesn't happen by you, it happens by the team that works alongside you. So how
hmm,
do you invest in the right kind of hiring, building that team up, uh, next level hiring, all hiring is important. And then not just hiring, once you get the team together, how do you make them high performing,
hmm,
how do you set the right incentives? So that's the whole team building part. And the third part is just goal setting and alignment and processes, right? So that a lot of the things, a lot of the decision making along the way becomes easy because either you have the right goal set or your processes in place. So
mm,
how do you do that so that you know you being a great leader, you have the right team,
mm,
and they have a lot of guidance in place on how to
mm,
execute,
mm,
right? So those are the
mm,
three elements on which I think which are critical to scaling up anything. And you're right,
mm.
companies can scale up, but when companies are scaling up, individuals have to scale up. And
Yeah,
when individuals scale up, then companies scale up. And I think it's a very
yeah,
tightly coupled relationship.
yeah. You know, and why am I asking you this question? Because on several forums, you have spoken about lifelong learning. In fact, the domain that you're an expert, you're considered as an expert in, is upskilling. Why is that important to upskill yourself every now and then? And what does that mean to you today when you're already playing a game at the global level?
Yeah, so I, I think the world is evolving very fast. And to me, upskilling or learning is all about, again, a mindset,
Mm,
right? If you become a learner by mindset, then you're just more open to absorbing new things
mm, mm,
and seeing better ways of doing the same things, right? That's what it means to me today. Oh, I've had uh, the privilege of having time with me over the last few months in between my roles, and uh, I've spent time reading a lot of books, and I've spent time learning how to cook. I've spent time improving my swimming technique. I've spent time writing Scale It Up, uh, and many other things. And what it has helped me to do is to just think more broadly and
mm,
deeply at the same point, right? So to me, I also took courses in DeFi and crypto just to understand what was happening in this new emerging world of blockchain, and all of that has just widened my horizon, right? So to me, learning, reskilling is a mindset that just
mm,
helps you to absorb more, right? Remember the days when you were in school or college and you were just learning and you were having fun in the best class that you took, right?
mm, mm.
Why can't that mindset be present all the time?
Yeah. And what is interesting is that you did not only speak about that learning something in your own domain, starting from cooking to swimming to the cryptocurrency and the blockchains of the world. You're actually bringing the complete gamut. And also, you use two words, right? It's not only about deepening, it's about broadening because that helps you to bring a different perspective to look at life, right?
Totally. I
Hmm.
think at the end of the day, holistic development is important. So you broaden your horizons, and then in some areas you also deepen your horizons.
Hmm. And Ishan, if you were to change one thing in your life that will take you miles ahead of in your own journey as an individual, I'm not talking about as a professional only. What one small shift would you ask from yourself?
Intentionally carve out time for myself every day
Hmm.
to do whatever: reading, writing, exercising, spending time with family, or even thinking about a problem at work. But carving out time for oneself is important. A friend of mine told me this quote from the U.S. Armed Forces, which is uh, "Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast."
Hmm.
Essentially, if you can slow down your day a little bit, then you can actually fasten it up because you can think more deeply. So, that's what I would like to do. Uh, that just be very intentional about having some time, especially when one is working full time.
And now let's say if you were to go back to your 21-year-old self, and if you were to give a piece of advice to that Ishan, what would you recommend?
I would tell that Ishan that hustle is not equal to hard work.
Hmm.
I would tell that Ishan that just because you're doing hard work and having you're having a time which is extremely exciting and thrilling, don't mistake it for hustle. Hustle is
Hmm.
about doing smart work. Hustle is about doing short term things, but by taking the long term view, by
Hmm.
being strategic about what you are doing. I think as an entrepreneur, I missed out on understanding that.
Hmm.
I kept on working every day, long hours, really enjoying it. But now when I look back, I wish instead of working those long hours, I'd actually spend time thinking about what I really want to do, how I really want to build a company long term. And I think that would have served me better.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Ishan. I think it was absolute pleasure having you in this conversation, and thank you so much for sharing time, your insights, your wisdom, starting from make the move to scale it up, and in between manage the move. And I wish you all the very best as you scale it up, both in your personal
Th-
and professional life.
Thank you, Gaurav. As always, very thoughtful questions, and you always ask things that makes me think. And I'm glad that I was your question around what brought the change from make the move to scale it up actually made me think about manage the move, which I had forgotten over the last couple of years. So I'm glad that you made me think of that again.
Pleasure. And let me know in case I could be of any service, just a call away, as you know, Ishan. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.